Hi, I'm Parker.
And I'm Tim.
And this is the Rage Podcast, where today we're going to focus on, well, kind of Holy Week in general. I bet we're going to probably hit everything that's going to happen this week, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's a lot to cover.
But obviously, this is a very important moment in season in the Christian faith, and known as the last week of Lent, Holy Week, where we go from Palm Sunday to Easter Sunday, where everything kind of progresses way too quickly in a sense. We go from Jesus being praised on this last Sunday, on Palm Sunday, and within just 4 days, no? 5 days.
5 days till Friday.
5 days till Friday, and now it is Jesus eventually gets betrayed, crucified, and goes through much more than that.
Yep.
So
it is literally the ultimate roller coaster of emotions. That
is, and that is this week where we have plot out. Obviously, Easter is coming up next Sunday, and everything else like that, and Good Friday, and Monday, Thursday. So it's a big time for Christians. All right.
This is the week that makes us different.
Yes, this is the week that makes us really. Yeah, that is very true. You know, all right. I see on my phone calendar all the time. Holidays are like, Ramadan begins at sundown and Yom Kippur begins at sundown. We have Holy Week, so making sure that's marked on your Google calendar for every year to come.
Just because Google don't say it, it is still happening.
Making sure you recognize what's going on this week, because it is what makes us different. That was a good interpretation. But what I have kind of planned to share, and I never know if I can even say the term planned when I talk about the rage.
Planned is used very loosely in this context.
But I want to talk about the Beatitudes, which really, in a larger sense, doesn't fit into the Holy Week kind of setting. Really, it's we're normally reading about Jesus facing Pilate, and the triumphal entry was last Sunday, and Monday, Thursday, and the washing of the feet, the Last Supper, the crucifixion, the resurrection. The early chapters, one of the first sermons, the Sermon on the Mount, is not something we normally have during this season,
because there's so much else going on.
It's an excellent passage, and it corresponds very well, I think, with Easter, but it's normally not one that we often sit down and study during this time. So, the Beatitudes, if you don't know some of them, I'll just read a few and it might trigger your memory. And so it comes from, I'm reading from Matthew 5, verse 3. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be steadfast. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Those are the Beatitudes. Now, what is important to recognize, I think, about the Beatitudes is it's not a to-do list. We aren't to say, well, I want to see the face of God, so I'm going to be, a very merciful person. Now, don't get me wrong here, okay?
Yeah. We are in favor of mercy here at the Rage Podcast. Yes.
But let's take some of the other Beatitudes in the sense of saying, well, those who are mourning, well, they will be blessed by God. They will be comforted by God. Well, I might not be in a state of, when I hear mourning, I think, whoa, that's like serious weeping, and, there's something internalized within you that is, a sad and mournful time. And it's not always right or good to be living your life constantly in a state of mourning, yet God will provide comfort.
Yeah, and I think what we're getting at here, and I don't want to get too far ahead of where we are, but is that in our culture, I think we have a temptation to read this as prescriptive. Well, if you want to see God, you're going to have to be mourning. And I know that's what Parker just said. And therefore we can manipulate. That might be kind of a strong word.
No, that's exactly where I was going to go.
But it might be manipulating God. So if I'm just depressed, or I'm triggered, or I'm sad, or whatever buzzword you want to use, then I'll get to see God. And I don't know that's how that should work.
And let's look at the last one. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Well, I'm not ever going to walk out on the street and yell, "Persecute me! Persecute me!" That's not. I don't think that's what it says. But it says when you get in the situations where you, as a follower of Christ, as a Christian in the world that we live in, where you may face persecution, don't worry.
Yeah.
Because one day yours will be the kingdom of heaven.
Right. And I think that's what Jesus was getting at here, was he was saying, don't think that because you're being persecuted that God's blessing has been withdrawn from you. Mm-hmm. You know, but that doesn't mean if you go out and make a pain of yourself and end up in jail and say, I'm here on a crusade or something, and now I'm closer to Jesus than everyone else. I don't think that's how it works either. And especially in our culture today where we want to give so many victim points to so many groups and decide who is the most oppressed in the world and whatever. And somehow that makes them, but by itself makes them a better person. I definitely don't agree with that. And I don't see the Beatitudes teaching me that either.
I think the Beatitudes is saying, here's some of the bad things in life,
which we all would agree with. I mean, nobody's disputing.
But it also, but don't get me wrong. It also says, like, for those who are pure in heart, they will see the face of God. So, like, don't get me wrong, they're not all bad, but the poor in spirit, the those who are mourning, the meek, the hungry, the persecuted, and all those things. It's not saying, oh, well, if I'm persecuted, that means I have to be, perfect relationship with God. No, that's not what it's saying. What I think is what it's saying is saying, here's where you can be at in life, and through the work that happens on Easter, I will now be able to go to the life next to come, and one day these are being offered to me through God. Not because I purposely walk into these situations and say, oh, well, I need to be mournful. So if whatever you do.
Yeah, so right. It doesn't mean you have to make up a reason to be upset, which see plenty of evidence people doing
Absolutely.
that. And that doesn't necessarily make them holier or better or whatever, no matter how high on the victim hierarchy they are. And I think that's where this falls down is Jesus was trying to say, no, if you're legitimately mourning, if you're legitimately persecuted because you are righteous and good, that doesn't mean that God has left you alone. It's you're still blessed. However, he's not saying, and I think this is where you're getting to.
Yeah.
He's not saying, oh, goodness gracious, persecution is now a conduit for God's blessing, because people in the world will be like, what are you talking about?
I'll persecute you if you persecute me,
that's right. That's right. So maybe Parker and I should start beating each other up so we can feel blessed.
But, so it doesn't make any sense. None of these should be ever afflicted upon someone, only in the sense of saying, I want to bless you.
And they shouldn't be sought out to say, if I can be the most persecuted person around, then I must be the holiest as well. Disagree completely.
Yep.
Because I think Parker and I would both agree that some of the most persecuted people in the country are the Westboro Baptist Church. There ain't no blessing going on there.
Well, that's very true.
So that's our problem with this. Is Jesus is trying to encourage people who are legitimately hurting, legitimately going into problems, not saying, if you could just list out all the possible problems you could possibly have and get that list long enough, then you're going to be blessed. Jesus would be like, what are you doing? This doesn't make any sense.
It's more or less like saying, this is how I think one of the easiest passages to use for evangelism, in the fact of saying, we all have faced many of these things. We all have, even from the people who are hungry and thirsty for righteousness, the fact of saying, like, the people who say, I know there's something more out there, but I have no clue what it may be. Or, like those who are poor in spirit, that's actually what poor in spirit means. Mm-hmm. It's not saying, oh, I have a weak relationship with God. It's saying, I want to know what there is out there. Poor in spirit is saying the people who recognize there's a spiritual side to life, yet don't know who God is or what God has done for them.
And don't make any attempt to find out.
Yeah, and that's
they just want to suffer more and think that gets them closer to God.
That is what the poor in spirit is. So having all those things and all those questions or whatever it may be, it's not a form of bringing blessings to people. It's a form of saying, my God can do this for you.
Right. It's not a sign of lack of blessing. Yeah. But on the flip side, it doesn't mean it's also a sign of blessing.
Because of what happened during Holy Week, the crucifixion and the resurrection, and knowing that our God has defeated death and conquered the grave and has done all of these wondrous things so that I may be, saved in all those other wonderful things that Jesus has done for us. That's when I truly see majority of these blessings. If you read them, it says, theirs is the kingdom of heaven. It also says, well, there's two of them that say theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Mm-hmm. Just mark that down. Okay, or they'll see the face of God, and or they'll be called sons of God, and all those things. Or they'll be comforted. All of those, I think, tend to come at the end of our lives. I'm not saying that God can't do these here on earth, but what I think is actually being said is saying, I'm going to do this for you. I think Jesus was actually foreshadowing the crucifixion.
And I think it goes even beyond that. It says, just because you've accepted Christ and you call upon the name of the Lord, like we talked about in church yesterday, and we have this experience of salvation and our heart is strangely warm like John Wesley, and all these things happen, it doesn't mean that that's also a free pass that nothing bad is ever going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
That you're never going to experience persecution. You're never going to experience being poor in spirit. You are going to experience things. That's not a sign of lack of blessing. At the same time, though, not only are you still blessed during those times, you're blessed because of your relationship with Christ. You're not blessed because of any kind of victim status that you have attained. Mm-hmm. And I think that's sometimes where the I don't know if confusion is even the right word, but the kind of incongruency of this comes in, is that a lot of people want to measure blessing or measure how close I am to God by how much I figure out ways to suffer, and that's wrong.
What it is a reverse imbalance. You have people who will say, well, if I have to live a life that is full of mournful, being impoverished and all those other things, if I want God to bless me and love me. And you also have the people saying, well, God's given me a Ferrari, and all those other things. Mm-hmm. So what we see is we can go way off one spectrum or way off the other.
Yeah.
And
where the correct place is in the middle.
Middle.
Yeah.
And what I think is so important around this season, especially in the world that we live in, as Tim's mentioned many times in this episode alone, is do not use the work that Christ has done to justify your own wrongdoings. Mm-hmm. Like does that like in the sense of saying what happens on Good Friday, the blood shed, the crucifixion, and the curtain torn, and then eventually we come to Easter Sunday where we have the victory. Mm-hmm. But we know that on Good Friday, the death of Christ is what eventually gives me the atonement of my sins, the forgiveness of my sins, was the death of Christ. Mm-hmm. So do not take the work that happens on Good Friday to be a crutch for your own evilness.
Yeah. I mean, to try to pick up for what you should pick up for yourself, yeah.
But I feel like we talked about this recently, actually, in the fact, if I set a standard of saying, well, as long as I don't murder someone, I'm fine. I'll get through. I'll get by. Don't set your standard saying I can do this, and I'm sure God's not going to get that mad at me if I do this, and all these other things.
Yeah, grace is not a crutch.
Grace is not a crutch.
Yes, and that's very important to think, because I could just do whatever I want, and I just tell God I'm sorry, and everything is hunky dory. Yes, that may no longer jeopardize your eternal salvation, but it does jeopardize your witness in the world. Mm-hmm. And we've talked a number of times here on the podcast about that, about how you don't want to let your own experience and your own desire to have whatever it is or do whatever it is you want to do in life to get in the way of what God has designed you to be and do. And let's be honest, this week above all weeks, we recognize the great price tag that brought along with it, to enable us to be free from sin and to be able to live with that kind of freedom and have all that. It came at great cost. And I as a sinner myself, I struggle to think that God went through all that just so I could do whatever I wanted, no matter how self-destructive it was. To give us freedom to destroy ourselves or to live depressed lives because that helps me have victim points and go higher on the hierarchy and all that. I think of things in my life that cost me a lot. If I saw somebody else taking my investment and doing something destructive with it, I'd feel bad about that. That would make me feel bad. And I think we do much better when we try to hear the words of Jesus in the way they were meant to be heard. And that is, look, you hit a rough patch in life and things aren't going well and this is going bad and that relationship's going sour and all this stuff. And you feel like you're under the gun and people are upset because you have integrity and all that stuff. Don't think that's a lack of blessing. You're still being blessed. You're still being uplifted. You're still maintaining your witness. But that doesn't mean you should seek those things out to be able to experience. You should be experiencing those things without the suffering and without the victim points and without the downside of all those things. You should be able to experience without.
Look at Christ. Not once in his life he was man and did nothing wrong. Yet for some reason, he eventually got caught up in the Roman law. Yeah. And that guy went through it. Mm-hmm. You know what is bizarre to think of is just imagine being in that crowd but being the one person who has the knowledge of what's actually going on. I mean, that's a picture that'd be. I was obviously it's Holy Week, all right? We all know what's going on, but like thinking about.
Yeah, we have hindsight when none of those people.
We have the knowledge of what's actually going on, and yet like some people today, like how we talked about using it as a crutch, like Christ had no crutch. Like he laid it all out. I mean, obviously he was the Son of God, yet God himself made sure that so he could relate to us, went through life with no crutch. He came down to earth. He was, he was born of a woman and all those.
He knew what it meant to feel like to be poor in spirit. He certainly knew what it felt like to be persecuted. He certainly knew what all these things felt like. But he also maintained that I'm still blessed, even though I might not be terribly thrilled with what's going on here. I'm still blessed, and I think that's what the Beatitudes are reminding us of. Is that, just because life may not always be hunky-dory every day, you're still living in blessing. A tremendous blessing.
Yeah.
And don't forget that. I think that's what the Beatitudes are trying to get us to remember.
Yeah. I think the Beatitudes, they're obviously a very well-known passage of Scripture. And they have a lot of messages within the Beatitudes alone. But understanding that just because I'm at a comfortable spot right now does not mean I need to put myself into a mournful spot for God to see me,
or try to figure out how to define yourself into a mournful spot. Yes.
Well, I feel like sometimes we get caught up saying God doesn't see me if I'm not mournful, or if I'm not
false.
Yeah, God always has an eye on literally everything. God is God. He has the capabilities of doing that kind of thing. So don't think that if I'm not suffering on earth, God doesn't really know I exist. I mean, but like I feel like I've even thought about sometimes.
Actually, I'm going to take that a step further. If you're going through life and you're not suffering, God is very well aware of you exist. Guess who is not noticing you at that point? And that would be the other guy.
Yeah.
That would be Satan not noticing you, because apparently what you're doing is fine with him, so he's not going to come against you for that. And that actually might be something you want to worry about.
Yeah.
Is if life is going too cushy and too great and too easy, and things are going along, and you're not dealing with any kind of adversity. I mean, there's a reason why the football players on the field who are the best get defended the hardest. I mean, life is much the same way. The people who are making the greater strides are the ones who get the greater attention of the enemy. And again, that's not to say you want to flag it down and say, hey, come do something terrible to me. But at the same time, a cushy life means, you may not be the one that is attracting that much attention of the bad guys around. And that might be something you want to think about as well.
So this is a week where we're going to, I hope and I pray that all of you will dive into what's going on. And actually, like I said, my whole last Wednesday message was about going through your Lenten journey not knowing how it ends. This Friday, you're going to come to the realization that, wow,
it ends pretty good.
This guy.
Yeah.
But again, have that same motto this whole week. We just got done praising Jesus from the triumphal entry on Sunday. It's Monday right now when we're filming this. And within that span of time, the world's hearts towards Christ completely shift, and we go to having him crucified. And we have the Last Supper, and we have Judas betraying Jesus, and all these other things. Walk through that journey not knowing how it ends. Like walk through it saying, and today Christ died. Because like the disciples at that time, I mean, you can't imagine.
Clearly all they knew. Yeah.
I mean, that's all they knew was saying, wow, the guy who
came back, they were incredibly shocked.
Yeah, the guy who I spent a lot of my life and put a lot of trust in died the most ridiculing death and so forth that he could ever face. So like that's what's bizarre.
Yeah.
And I think that's how we actually get to go into the real experiences of this season of Holy Week and of Lent entirely. Yes, it's awesome how it ends. The ending's great. Yet don't let the ending take away from what's actually going on the rest of this week.
Yeah. And remember that no matter how bad it got, Jesus still maintains being blessed, even though, again, not good, but blessed. The situation was not good, but blessed. And not because he brought this on himself. He was blessed prior to the events of Holy Week. And I think that would be the reminder he would say to us today is you don't have to be at the bottom of the world to be blessed. You can be blessed where you are, but understand that if you are going through a trial or if Satan does have you in his crosshairs, don't interpret that as a withdrawal. That word didn't want to come out. withdrawal of God's blessing, because it's not. So with that in mind, wherever you guys are today or whatever's going on, we certainly hope you're going to be celebrating the Holy Week and certainly Easter Sunday along with your congregation. It's a great time to remind ourselves that, doesn't matter what else is going on. We're really blessed because Easter is going to happen regardless of what happens on Good Friday. And it's a great message and a great inspiration of hope. And we hope that, as we talked about in church yesterday, you guys will call upon the name of the Lord and be recognized by Jesus, because it literally gets no better than that, no matter what else is happening. So happy Easter, everybody. Enjoy your celebrations. Traveling mercies to all of you, and have a great time. And we'll start probably some kind of a series after Easter. Mm-hmm. We'll think of something here. Yeah. Not sure what it will be yet.
We don't really know.
Yeah. Usually about 10 minutes before we start filming, we decide what it's going to be.
We'll have a series figured out probably, next Monday.
Yeah. So you guys have a happy Easter and enjoy it. And thanks for joining us.